This is the story of a big businessman named Min Q. He has a dangerous disease. He is allergic to humans. Whenever he touches a human being, blisters appear on his body turns red, and he even feels difficulty breathing. Min Q was fed up with his disease. He wants to spend life like an ordinary human being. He also wants a friend in his life. He wants to get married, but he used to stay alone because of his disease. That's why he locked himself in the house for years. Min Q gets his treatment at his house. One day, his doctor comes home and asks Min Q to live with his disease because there is no cure for it. Meanwhile, he gives him a wristwatch to wear. Different colors will indicate the condition of his sickness. In blue, the allergy will be normal. In yellow, there will be a slight attack. And in orange, Min Q's veins will stop working. In red, he will die in a while. One day, a scientist named Hong contacts Min Q and says he has made a robot with his team that will work like a human. Min Q will not get an allergy attack even if he touches her. The scientist Hong tells her the price of this robot is $100 billion. The next day, Min Q went to the lab and was shocked to see the robot. It was made while giving a pretty face. Min Q touched her, but nothing happened to him, and he became happy to see this. The robot calls her Aji, and Min Q is ready to buy that robot. He spends a lot of money on this robot. The next day, the scientists were testing the robot, and a scientist bounced a soda bottle from which a drop fell on Aji, and there was a huge short circuit. The processing system of that robot got damaged. The system with which she works makes the whole team get worried because they have to deliver Aji to Min Q, and they have taken money from him. The team thinks it would take a lot of time to repair it, and their deal would also be cancelled here. Hong gets an idea. He made Aji 3 by giving her the face of her old friend named Jia. He goes to meet her and tells her the whole matter. His plan was to send Jia, a real human, as a robot, to Min Q. At first, she hears about the matter and refuses, but when Hong gives her money, she agrees because she is poor. The scientist team takes Jia to the lab and makes her learn all the things about robot Aji, including how she works, how she stands up, how she gives water, and everything else. Later, they make her wear the same clothes, like that robot hair extension, and lenses are placed in her eyes, which will work as a camera through which they will spy on Jia and Min. Anyhow, Jia was sent to Min Q's house after making her ready to be a robot. As Min Q opens the coffin, Jia gets scared to see him. The thing is, Jia delivered food to Min Q a few days ago, but Min Q didn't like that food. That's why he didn't pay Jia, and when Jia tried to stop her, Min Q ran away from there so that Jia couldn't touch him, to which he is allergic. But Min Q doesn't remember all this. Now he calls Hong and asks about Jia's fear and anger. Hearing this, Hong tells him a story and says this Aji robot has two modes. One is operational and the other is friend mode. In operational mode, she becomes angry, but in friend mode, she will behave like a human. Moreover, he says there is a button behind her neck. Just press it, and everything will be fine. Min Q does the same and tests Jia, which means she was a robot in front of him. Min Q wants to see if she works properly or not. Meanwhile, the light in Hong's lab turns off. Now Jia has to handle all this alone. Because Hong can't contact her, Min Q asks her to open a box that she has to open with a math code. But Jia is weak in math, so she breaks the box. The next task was to peel off a boiled egg in 10 seconds. And because Jia worked in a restaurant, she passed this test easily. Min Q becomes happy with all this, and thinks of keeping her with him. The light comes into Hong's lab, and it gets connected to Jia's lenses. They see Jia yelling at Min Q because he placed his hand on her back to check her battery. Min Q calls Hong and says, "You are cheating me because the battery of this robot is damaged." But he says there is nothing like this. Whenever you feel that the battery of this robot is showing problems, just bring it to me, and I will fix it. There could be a short circuit if you touch her. After it, Min Q goes to his kitchen to drink water, but suddenly stops breathing. Jia runs to him and pats his back. This makes him fine for a while, and he asks, "How did you do this without my order?" She says there are a lot of functions in me, and with their help, I can do work on my own. Here, Min Q touches Jia for the first time, but surprisingly, nothing happens to him. There was no allergic reaction. Even though Jia was an ordinary human in real life, and was just pretending to be a robot in front of him. At night, Hong brings Jia to the lab on the pretext of fixing the battery and says, "You know, you were about to trick us all about what would happen if Min Q discovered the truth." This makes Jia furious, and she thinks she didn't do her task well, so she leaves. After it, Hong and his team find out that Aji was sent to Africa for repairs, where it would take 2 more weeks. At the same time, Hong gets a call from Min Q, and he says, I like the robot allergy 3 made by you and I want to keep it for a month. Hong doesn't understand that now. What will he do? He calls Jia back and asks her to pretend for a few days more as a robot in front of Min Q. He offers her a huge amount in return and says, we will take you back in the land each night on the pretext of charging you. Hearing this, Jia was again ready to be a robot. One day Jia goes to the washroom and cleans it with Min Q's expensive perfumes. Meanwhile, Min Q comes and says, after seeing her, that robots can't go near water like this, so how are you doing all this? Jia replies as a robot, I am an advanced robot that can do anything. When Min Q was about to turn, he noticed sweating on Jia's face, but when he again turned behind, his foot slipped on a soap, and his back got injured. Likewise, one day Jia spoiled the card house made by Min Q while cleaning, and it took him 10 years to make it. Seeing it, Min Q becomes furious, and Jia says my battery is only 5% and asks to shut off. Min Q calls Hong at home and asks what the problem is with his robot. I am bearing losses because of her mistakes. Hong says to give me some time and I will fix it. One day, a special guest of Min Q was coming, so he forbade Jia to go out. Actually, his special guest was a girl whom Min Q liked a lot. When that girl comes to his home and touches Min Q's shoulder while meeting him, he gets an allergic attack. The girl doesn't know about his sickness, so he makes an excuse for a meeting and runs inside the house. He tries to reach the room where his allergy injections were, but can't inject the injection because of weakness. Seeing this, Jia comes, and Min Q is unconscious and lying down. From here, we are shown the story of the time when Min Q didn't have this illness and everything was normal for him. Min Q became happy when he made the first house of cards. One day, it was Min Q's birthday party, and everyone was gathered and happy. When Min Q was returning home with his parents from the party, his balloon came in front of the car, due to which he couldn't see the charcoal coming from the front. Their car had an accident, and Min Q's parents died in that accident. A lot of people were gathered at their funeral and were trying to become Min Q's guardian. Actually, they were not interested in Min Q but were behind his dad's property. One day Min Q gets a notice from Madam X about whom we will know further. It was written that, son, you don't have to sign any papers. One day, he was sitting alone, and his friend came to him with papers of adoption. He said, look, sign these papers, and after it, you will become my brother. Min Q signed those papers. But when he saw the hand of his friend changed into a devilish one, he got scared and ran from there. Now that his friend comes back to his dad and gives him papers, Min Q has written something else instead of his signatures. Min Q comes home and starts living alone because it was in his mind that people are evil, and behind his property. Since then he was allergic to humans, and none knew this except for his special doctor. With this, the story shifts to the present and Min Q comes to his senses. He finds Jia near him and says, I have seen a dream that everyone is my enemy. He is surprised that he has become fine. He starts spending more time with Jia, and then one day he goes to meet the girl whom he likes. The girl again shakes hands with Min Q while leaving, and he gets an allergic attack. He tries to inject his injection, but then he thinks about when he will spend his life like this. So he goes to throw his injection in the water. Meanwhile, Jia comes to him, and his allergy was ended without injecting any injection. The temperature of his clock was also normal in blue. They were returning home, and Min Q collided with a man, but even then, nothing happened to him, and seeing all this, he didn't believe that he had become fine. Now, to see if he is fine or not, he decides to go in a crowd with Jia. He has never done this before in his life. He again collides with a boy, and nothing happens to him. When a man touches him, even this time, nothing happens to him. He calls his doctor and says, I am fine now. Meanwhile, a man hits him, and Jia was also not with him at that time. Min Q again gets an allergic attack, but he becomes fine when he sees Jia, who was standing at a far distance. Min Q says to the doctor on call that there is someone whom I see and who will be fine. The doctor was also surprised to hear all this. Min Q runs to Jia and says, we'll buy the biggest battery in the world for you. You will be with me forever. Reaching home, he again tells everything to the doctor, and he says, Min Q, I am shocked that you have become fine without injection. Now Min Q keeps Jia with him all the time, and for him, she is still just a robot. On the other side, it is shown in the lab that the real allergy robot has been repaired, but it would take a little more time to work properly. Jia finds out that the allergy robot has been repaired. She becomes sad because she is now habitually living with Min Q. One day Min Q takes Jia to the hotel, and the girl whom Min Q likes has come with her dad. He makes Jia sit on another table. Jia doesn't like this, and she doesn't talk to Min-kyu when he returns. Min-kyu also found out that he is fine until the allergy robot, which means Jia will be with him. One day, he stops at a gas station, and his hand touches the worker's hand while taking the credit card. But moving ahead, he notices that someone has touched him, but nothing happens to him. He tells this to his doctor, and he says you have become fine, so send that robot back, whom you kept at home. This means he was talking about Jia, but Min-kyu has fallen in love with Jia. He goes to Hong and tells him what is in his heart. Hong says you are talking about a robot that was designed before, but Min-kyu says then what should I do? I am going crazy. How can I forget her? Hong says there is a way. I will delete all the memories of that robot due to it. She will forget everything, and you will also move somewhere else. Now Jia was made into an allergy robot and sent to Min-kyu for the last time. They looked at each other, and there was snowfall outside. They went for a walk for the last time. They return home. Min-kyu thanks Jia that she made him fine and then makes her wear his mom's locket. Later, he hugs her and weeps a lot while pressing the reset button. On the other side, the allergy robot also finds out that Min-kyu's folder is deleted. They weep a lot while missing each other, and Jia weeps so much that she becomes sick. The next morning, they started a new life, and Jia was ready to go to her grandma. She was sitting in the train, and Min-kyu also reached the same train, incidentally, because he saw Jia and thought the girl looked like an allergy robot. They were sitting in front of each other but didn't talk because Jia was forbidden to talk to Min-kyu. He calls Hong and says, I have seen a face like your robot. He replies, yes. I have given a special one's face to that robot. Min-kyu asks, can I talk to that person? He says no, and saying this, he disconnects the call, but Min-kyu doubts, so he chases Jia and reaches the place where she does the job and lives with her grandmother. Her grandma runs a hotel. Everyone left, but Min-kyu was sitting and waiting for her. Jia gets fed up and says yes, my face was given to Aji, and in return, I was given a huge amount. Telling all this, she asks him to leave, but Min-kyu wants to stay with her, and he becomes friends with her grandma in a few days, and he spends all the moments with Jia, which he thought he spent with robot Aji 3. One day, he comes back and doesn't find Jia in the hotel. She left her grandmother's house. Now he looks for her like crazy, but then finds her near the seashore. He sees the locket in Jia's neck that he gave to the allergy robot. Jia tries to hide it, but Min-kyu has seen it. His condition wasn't well, and he understood that he was cheated. His allergy level reached the red level, and this had never happened to him before. He fell down, and there were only a few chances for him to survive. Meanwhile, the doctor and Hong arrive, and they take him home while giving him an injection. He was treated. Jia wanted to meet Min-kyu and tell him everything, but the doctor forbade her. A special assistant of his comes to Min-kyu when he recovers and asks him to file a case against Jia and Hong's company alleging that they cheated him. Here we find out that assistant was actually Jia's brother and left Min-kyu's job after Jia's cheating. Min-kyu goes to Hong's team and evacuates their lab because they are cheating on him. On the other side, Jia was busy cooking for Min-kyu. She was cooking and bringing food for him daily. But Min-kyu was furious at her and threw her food in the dustbin daily. Jia says, do whatever you want to. I will come daily to give you food. Min-kyu was missing Jia. When he goes to sleep at night, he goes out to his servant, who was sitting by the fire, and asks, did you lie to me, ever? Tell me. The servant says no, but every person tells some lies in his life. The next morning, Jia was bringing food for Min-kyu, but her bike got into an accident because a boy came on the way, and her hand got injured. Min-kyu becomes restless when Jia doesn't come to Min-kyu on time, because he loves her a lot. Jia comes at night instead of day and sets the food on his table as per routine. She was leaving, but then Min-kyu comes and says, you look so happy while lying and cheating on me. Jia says, listen to me. I want to tell you so many things. But Min-kyu wasn't in the mood to listen to anything and broke the glass furiously. The glass hits Jia's hand, and her hand starts bleeding. Even then, she apologizes to Min-kyu and leaves. Jia's friend comes to Min-kyu's house in the morning. She tries to make him understand while saying, leave your ego. Otherwise, you will be alone and imprisoned in your memories. Jia is leaving for Australia with Hong's team, so stop her. Min-kyu acts to be normal in front of Jia's friend but is worried deep inside. The next morning, he goes to Jia's residence and sees Hong's team there, but he leaves in his car and returns home. After it, he sees the news on the TV that today 70 stars will be seen in the sky. He finds Jia's umbrella when he goes to change his umbrella. Seeing it, he gets lost in their love memories. On the other hand, Aji was working properly, and Min-kyu decided to meet Jia because he found out that he couldn't live without her. He goes to meet Jia on a rock, and Jia says she acted as a robot. You were spending your time with a human being, not a robot. Meanwhile, Min-kyu misses the moments spent with Jia. He says, "Tell me the truth, Jia. How many more lies have you told me? How stupid was I that I couldn't differentiate between a real human and a robot?" Jia says, "I haven't told you any other lie than this. I like to spend time with you on this." He asks her to sit near him and says, "Tell me whatever is in your heart." She says, "I remember all the moments spent with you. I didn't want to lose you, and I tried many times to tell you the truth but just remained quiet, thinking that you might get your allergy back, because this was only over when you removed all the old memories from your mind." Hearing this, Min-kyu moves Jia closer, but then remembers that he has an allergy and says to Jia, "We were together till now. Now you go your way, and I go my way. I will go far from everyone where humans will not come near me. I will start spending my life like before." But Jia stops him. She weeps a lot and says, "Please don't go. I loved you a lot, and you are the person for whom I was waiting in my life." Hearing this, Min-kyu hugs Jia, and many stars are shown breaking on the sky. The next morning, they go on a long drive. Min-kyu sees the allergy sign on his watch when he takes coffee from the cafe. When he sees Jia sleeping in the car, his allergy becomes normal. Then he drops her home and asks her to meet soon. After it, he comes home and calls his doctor. The doctor says to Min-kyu, "Your sickness has no cure. This disease can attack at any time or can be cured at any time." It is shown in the next scene that a rich man named Martin comes to buy Aji from Hong. She was fine now. He says, "I will use this robot as a dangerous weapon," and he buys her. Actually, Martin asked Hong's team to make this robot. Now Min-kyu comes and asks about Aji, but Hong says Martin, a dangerous culprit, has taken her. Martin was ready to go with Aji 3 in a huge coffin, but when he opened it, the robot wasn't there. On the other hand, we see Aji's robot wandering in the city. She has no memories and doesn't know anything about herself. Min-kyu also returns home, and a small, cute robot says, "Hi." He sees Jia and Hong's team cooking in his kitchen. Jia tells him that she is leaving, but Min-kyu becomes sad hearing this and starts making excuses that the weather isn't well so they should stay here. Aji is shown watching videos that were saved in her. One of Martin's videos in which he says he will use her as a dangerous weapon. She also sees Hong's team's video, in which they all say you are a friendly robot and will become friends with humans. Aji deletes Martin's video and keeps Hong's video, which means she made friendships with humans in her mind. In the next scene, we see Min-kyu meeting Madame X. She is the same lady who wrote a note for Min-kyu in his childhood, "Don't sign any papers," and she used to help him all the time. She tells him that Martin is a dangerous man, and it will be beneficial for many people if we catch him. A man has evidence against him. After it, Min-kyu goes to meet that man and asks him for the evidence, but that man was scared, and Min-kyu says, "Look, our police team will protect you, so you don't need to be scared." Now that the man was ready to give evidence against Martin to Min-kyu, Min-kyu sent the evidence to the police. Jia also takes Min-kyu to a place where a huge deal was going on to buy Aji, but upon reaching there, Min-kyu finds out that the Aji robot is missing. Martin was also worried because there were his recordings in Aji 3, and he was scared that if the police discover this, he will be caught. We see Aji 3 wandering on the roads with people who don't know anything about her and sitting near a beggar on the road. She asks for her address, but everyone is searching for her. Jia and Min-kyu were looking for her on the roads while Hong's team was checking the CCTV cameras. But soon Martin's companions discover Aji's location. Now two strangers come in front of her and say, "We are your relatives." Aji robot sits in their car. Meanwhile, the police come and arrest Martin and his companions, and Hong's team brings Aji back to their lab. They were all happy that they had found Aji 3 and didn't let her go into the wrong hands. Jia and Min-kyu were happy and were having food along with Hong's team and watching Aji 3's videos when she met humans outside. Aji has done a good job. Hong says, "I am going to change her face that night," and they all say her goodbye together. Min-kyu also tells everything about him in front of the media, that he is allergic to humans, but everything is getting fine with the passage of time. He thanks those who made him fine, which means Jia and Hong's team. Moreover, he tells that he will spend a lot of money on a robot. Telling this, his market shares climb rapidly. He was looking happy and satisfied while taking the right decisions in his life. He calls Jia and asks her to meet at dinner. He tells Jia that her brother still doesn't want to do a job with him, and that he is ready to resign. Now that Jia meets her brother and talks about this in front of his wife forbids him to resign. The next morning, Jia's brother goes to Min-kyu and apologizes. He has taken his resignation back. Now, after some time, The story is shown when Hong was about to launch a new AI robot. On the other hand, Jia's brother also becomes a manager at Min Kya's company. Jia is shown showing her company's lamps to customers, and she has to go to meet Min Kyu after a while. Hong's team and Jia's family were already there. She came home, and a car stopped outside his house, from which a soldier came out. He was none other than Min Kyu, who has become a soldier. Jia came closer but slipped, and Min Kyu handled her. He was staring at her, which meant they had moved far in their lives. Min Kyu's illness was also cured. After this lovely moment, they are shown heading towards Min Kya's house, where everyone was waiting for them. The series comes to an end here.